It's the weekend, and you have financial questions that need answering. That can only mean one thing. It's time for Jill on Money, the show that takes the mystery out of your finances. Here's your host, Jill Schlesinger.
Welcome to Jill on Money. Hey, thanks so much for hanging out with us. We are delighted you're here. This is about the most fun we have all week long for both me and Mark. Well, Mark, you have more fun these days. You do other stuff too. But for me, this is the highlight. Absolutely. This is the program where we try to give you some actionable advice with your money. And the way we do that is we encourage you to give us a shout. You can do that by sending us an email. Ask Jill at jillonmoney.com. Hey, during the week, if you were, in between the central bank, jobs report, everything, there was this interesting factoid about something going on potentially in the tax arena. According to some well-placed sources, meaning people who read the New York Times, the Treasury Department is considering whether or not they can change how capital gains rates are calculated. And it's kind of interesting because what they are suggesting is that, the way that we currently look at capital gains is we say, okay, you bought a stock for $10,000, right? And maybe you bought that 20 years ago, or a mutual fund. Now you're selling it. It's $100,000. So you would normally be taxed on that on a long-term capital gains basis. You'd get taxed on that $90,000, right? And, the tax rates for capital gains are 0, 15, 20% plus that 3.8%. So the top bracket, 23.8%. Okay, just keep that in mind. Now, according to what's being contemplated, the way that the tax calculation would shift is not around the rate, but how your cost basis is treated. So let's go back to my original example. You buy a stock or a mutual fund for $10,000, and maybe 20 years later, the inflation rate ran at a certain percentage, which would bring up your cost basis. So instead of, let's say, $10,000, the cost basis might be $30,000. Now, when you go to sell your stock for $100,000, instead of being taxed on a $90,000 gain, you'd be taxed on a $70,000 gain. So that could save some real money. This is not a definite. It's just being noodled around. The big question is whether the Treasury Department actually has the unilateral authority to change the tax code. You might think they might need Congress for that, but perhaps not. Also, people are complaining that, indexing capital gains to inflation would not just reduce government revenues by about $100 billion. Most of that change would benefit the top 1% of taxpayers. 86% of the change. So it ain't happening just yet, but just shows you there's a lot of things being noodled around these days. Indexing your cost basis for capital gains contributions is just one of them. So we'll keep an eye on that. We'll keep you apprised of any changes should they arise. There's enough tax changes going on this year for everyone's good. I'm really exhausted. Okay, let's start the program the way we always do, which is with a caller. Today it's Terri, who is calling from New York. Hi, Terri. Welcome to Jill on Money. What can I do for you?
Hi, Jill. Thanks for having me on your show.
Sure.
I have a couple of questions. So I'm nearing retirement. I'm a little young, 54. My husband is 62. And because of our age difference, we want to retire a little early. And I would like to just go over a few of my points and get your thoughts on a few things.
Sure. Tell me what else is going on.
Okay. So my husband is already collecting Social Security, so we have a guaranteed income there.
Mm-hmm. How much is
right
that?
Now, $23.50 a month.
Okay.
I make $90,000. and I max out my 401k,
Mm-hmm.
and I have about $500,000 in that right now.
Great. Fantastic.
Okay, and my husband has about $300 in an IRA with Vanguard.
Great. Also.
Okay, we have a income property, and we plan on selling that next year, and should clear around $150,000.
Great.
And we plan on using that for living expenses for 2 years or so that we can let the other money grow.
Mm-hmm.
And use also some of that to possibly buy a townhome in a different area that's less money.
Wait a second. So the income property, you're not living in it, or you are living in it right now?
I live in it right now.
Okay.
I do live in it right now.
So the game plan is you said you're 54?
Yes, I am.
And so next year you turn 55. Your husband is already collecting Social Security. And you would sell that income property next year. You'd net this. What would you live in once you sell that property? Is that the townhouse, or would you rent?
Well, we would, depending on when exactly I left my job, we'd probably rent for a little while. We might even rent one of these apartments that I'm in.
Okay.
Until we get wherever we're going.
All right. Interesting. Okay. So if you were going to rent and pay your bills, how much do you need to live on a monthly basis?
We could probably honestly do it on less than $5,000 a month. We're pretty frugal.
$5,000 a month. Okay, I gotcha. And he's got $2,350, and he collected Social Security at age 62. Is that what happened for him? Is that $2,350 that you just said? That's the.
No, technically, it's disability.
Oh, will his benefit increase?
No.
Or he's permanent at $2,350?
Right.
Okay.
Less whatever adjustments are made.
Right. Okay. Yeah. And what is your Social Security estimate at, let's do it at 62 and then your full retirement age? Do you know those numbers?
Approximately. At 62, it should be approximately $2,000, and if I were to wait, which I probably won't, I think it's closer to 25, 26.
Okay, got it. All right. So you got these assets, sell the house, you need about $5,000 a month to pay your bills. All right, so here's what we're going to do. I got to do a little calculating, and we're going to go to a break, so it gives me some time to calculate, which is always a good push for me, right? And while I calculate, I want to see what this looks like for you, because you do have a bunch of money saved. I guess the big question is, at this point, what it looks like if you wait a year or two longer than what you're planning on. So instead of you retiring at 55, what does 56, 57 look like? Let's see. All right. You are listening to Jill on Money. And if you'd like to get on the air, just like Terri, all you have to do is send us an email. Ask Jill at jillonmoney.com. When we return, more of Terri and her husband's retirement plan. We'll be right back.
The cure to your financial problems could be just a phone call away. 855-411-JILL is the number to dial. Back to Jill on Money with Jill Schlesinger.
You're back with Jill on Money. During the break, I've been very busy with my calculator. Very, very busy. Okay, we are on the line with Terri from New York, who called in about her retirement plan. And her husband is already claiming Social Security disability benefits, $2,350 a month. Terri, is that the gross number or the net number, that $2,350 a month for him?
That's the net.
Okay, got it.
Right now, I cover his insurance right now.
I gotcha. Okay. What happens when you retire? If you were to retire next year, what would you do for your health insurance?
I would look into a high deductible plan. I'm healthy. And I would just pay for it.
Okay. Have you looked into that yet?
Yeah, it should be a few hundred a month, and then I would also do the high deductible with
HSA.
And HSA. Thank you.
Yeah, I gotcha. Okay, so I'm looking at these numbers, and you said that you probably need about $5,000 a month for your living expenses, right? And you said that at age 62, you would receive about $2,000 in Social Security, right? So, and again, would that be net or gross, do you think?
That would be net because I couldn't collect anything.
Right. Okay. So it looks to me like you're pretty close, right? You'd have about $4,300 in your net, and you would need another $800, right? And what you're thinking is that you could, at least for the time being, or as long as possible, you would take the proceeds from your property, that $150,000, and you would use that to come up with that gap between what you need and what you would have coming in, right? And it seems to me that the big problem is not when you are 62, 6 years from now, but the big problem is now until that point.
Right.
So I guess...
Well, we can withdraw money from from our plan, right?
Totally. No. That's not the issue, because I think you're going to be I think the house proceeds essentially will get you there, right? Because, you could probably limp along and pull money out of those if you're going to have $150,000 in cash, right? And so we're not retiring you right now. We're retiring you in a year, right?
Right.
So then I've got 7 years where I have to worry about you. I got to worry about you. You see, you're not worried about yourself. I'm worried about you. So, the 150 is not going to last you forever, but it would be pretty good. It's close. Maybe 5 years is what you will. How much do you have in an emergency reserve fund?
Not a lot, only about $10,000. So that was another part of a question. So if I were to, I maxed out my 401k, and we also contribute to the IRA.
Yeah.
So what if I were to, do a little less there and do a little more saving?
Yeah, I would do that. Here's what I'm thinking. You need about $25,000 a year until you're 62, right? Because I've got to make that up. And no.
No, well, so I was thinking if we went to if I lived on this for 2 to 3 years, my husband's old enough, we could pull money out of his his IRA a little bit.
Yeah, but I need that. I need your money.
Supplement.
Yes, you totally could. I'm trying to leave those assets separate, just like literally see what it would happen if you didn't have to touch them, because I'm worried that you're young. You are young and you are healthy, right?
Yes, I am.
So, it's I don't want you to feel like you are like, oh crap, I've lived too long and I don't have enough money. That's not a fun place to be. So, if I'm looking like back of the envelope, if you, instead of putting $24,500 into your retirement account, and you said he's putting money into, I would definitely not put any more money into his IRA for sure. I would not do that. But I would like to see you guys get to maybe like $200,000 in your, slush fund account. So the 150, right, is what's coming from the property. If we could get that to 200, that would make me feel a little bit more comfortable, because then I could say, I could take $25,000 a year for 4 or 5 years, see how it goes, let the other assets rise in value. Like, I don't want you to be forced to pull money out of these retirement accounts, God forbid, at a time when the market's down. And frankly, I need your money to be there for you. We need we really want you to have, by the time you're cranking up and really ready to live in retirement, we want you to have $1 million, because, if something happens to him, you still have to live, and I bet your living expenses are not going to drop really, really low, when one survives the other. So I think that you can make this. I just think it's close, and I'd rather you have a little bit more in liquidity, especially at a time where, I don't know what's going to happen to him. Is he able to? Can he manage himself? Like, he's on disability. Is he okay medically?
Yeah, no, he's okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, I got nervous there. I think it sort of kind of works. It's close. Obviously, every year that you delay is better for you financially, but it may not be better for you, like, in your real life. You may really say, "Hey, I want to be with him and hang out." That said,
that's it.
Yeah, that's
it in a nutshell,
right? So, you may, if you're willing to do this, what I think you should sort of say is, I'd like to beef up the liquidity a little bit, right? And you're going to drop down into a lower tax bracket once you do retire, so that's good. But I mean, you're right. You can tap those retirement assets. I just don't want you to do that unless you have to. And I wouldn't be in a rush to buy anything after you sell your place. I actually would be more inclined to see you rent for a little bit and just see how it goes and see what your needs are and see how it feels, because you don't know what it's like to be retired yet. You might hate it. You might be like, you know what? I need to do something part-time because he's driving me crazy. I'm not saying that's going to happen.
That could happen.
Right? And so then, you don't want to be stuck buying something in a place where you're not sure you want to live. I think you could do it. It's weird. It is close. It's close, but if you're willing to make adjustments along the way, then I think you'll be okay.
Okay.
How's that sound?
That sounds good. You do the plans on Vanguard and Fidelity. That's where our other money is, and the plans say that everything is good.
Yeah.
But I found your show a couple of months ago, and it just hit me that I'm going to try and get an answer from you, because I value your opinion. I listen to you, and you're awesome. I love your show. I don't miss it now.
Oh, well, thank you so much. I so appreciate it. I think you're awesome because you're thinking this through and you're running the numbers, and I think that you're going to be okay. And I hope you guys get through this transition with minimal discomfort, and that you have some fun.
All right. Thank you, Jill.
Take care. Yeah, that's interesting. Really interesting. Because it is, you hear me talk through these kinds of these questions, and what I keep finding is that people, if you're willing to make a shift in the way you spend, you're going to have many more opportunities. I think the issue for most of us is that it's hard to actually make the shift unless you are running the numbers and you know what you're shifting towards. So I really want to make sure that when people are hearing these calls, they're not extrapolating for themselves. Call us yourselves. Let us know how we can help you get to a better retirement future. And all you have to do is send an email, askjill@jillonmoney.com. That's askjill@jillonmoney.com. And we would be delighted to help you out. Hey, during the break, check out the website, jillonmoney.com, and let us know what you're thinking. Thank you so much to Miss Terri for that call, and we will get back to more of your questions. We'll be right back.
Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, she's all over the place. Go to JillOnMoney.com to find it all. Now back to the show with Jill Schlesinger.
You're back with Jill on Money. And if you've got a question, just send us an email. AskJill@JillOnMoney.com. Mark's finishing up his certified financial planner coursework. And I'm coaching him along the way. Not really coaching him, cheerleading along the way, because I don't think you've asked me a question in about 5 months. Maybe like one question in the last year. When did you start the classwork? Yeah, so I think maybe you asked me 1 or 2 questions, and that was it. And then I hooked you up with that guy who's a super smart guy. I said, you got a question about how to manage this. Talk to this guy. And he's helped you, right? Yeah, Brandt. He's a good dude. Hey, on Facebook, Mark puts up all this stuff. And sometimes people send me messages. So every so often, I like to just check those messages. And here was a nice one from somebody who is a librarian. How much do I love librarians? Who writes, you are cool, confident, and creative. I enjoy listening to your advice all the time. Thank you. You know you're going to get read if that is the message. That's for sure. What else can I tell you? There's a couple one. Hold on a second. Here's one. It's interesting. I recently encountered a video and found out that you shouldn't buy anything on sale that you wouldn't pay full price for. Do you agree with that? I don't know if I agree with that. There are times where I buy some. I mean, maybe. I get the point, but I mean, look, I'm not a consumer person like that. I'm more of a tax, investment, education, funding. I understand the concept, which is don't buy it because it's on sale. But if you were tending towards buying it, maybe I wouldn't have purchased an extra dress if it weren't on sale at Saks. But I know I need dresses in general for work. I didn't need that dress. I don't know. What do you think about that, Mark? I get the argument also. It's interesting. I'm going to think on it. Let's see. Let's think about that one. Here's a question from Robert, who's been saving his whole life. Now he's in retirement. He's living on his pension. And he wants to know where and when do I start withdrawing when it comes to investments? I've got a regular IRA, a tax-deferred IRA. I don't know what the difference. Though both are tax-deferred. I'm guessing that you mean you have an IRA. Maybe you have a tax-deferred retirement account. I don't know. Anyway, a Roth, an annuity, a 557 plan, which is for municipalities. I'm not collecting Social Security yet at 62. Okay, so my view on when to pull retirement assets is you try to delay pulling money for as long as you can. And what you really want to try to do is to use the tax code to your advantage. So let's say that you're 62 right now. You're not collecting Social Security yet, and your pension is just fine. And maybe you find that actually right now, in this moment, because of the change in the tax code, your tax bracket is much lower than you had anticipated. In that case, maybe it's worth thinking about taking some of the money that's not yet been taxed and take it out a little bit at a time. I'm going to give you an example. Let's say that you were working and you were making, I don't know, I'm going to just make it up, $200,000 a year while you were working. And previously, that $200,000 was taxed, at the 30%-ish, 28%, 30 tax bracket. And now on your pension, your tax bracket drops down to 22%. Well, that might be a good reason for you to start taking some of these assets out that will have to come out no matter what at age 70 and a half. You see, usually I would have said just wait till 70 and a half. That's when the government forces you to pull money out. But maybe pulling some money out a little bit at a time to stay within a much lower tax bracket than you ever anticipated could be a good idea. The one thing that seems the most important is don't pull money out of your Roth at all. That should be the last asset. So generally we say take money out of something that's already been taxed. Take money out of that first. Then you start pulling money out of your deferred accounts and leave the Roth for last. But again, this tax law change might encourage you to take money out at these lower tax brackets because I don't know how long this is going to last. I mean, right now, these brackets are supposed to pop back up in 5 or 7 years. So maybe in these years where you're going to be in this lower tax bracket, start pulling some of that money out, but not so much so that you go into the next bracket. I mean, there's two really interesting brackets to me, the 22 and the 24% brackets, especially that 24. If you're married filing jointly, that bracket is 165 to 315. That's a big, wide bracket. You could take a lot of money out and not go over that 315. So I think that's what I would do. If you've got more questions, please feel free, Robert, to come back on the air. Just come talk to us, and we can talk a little bit more about the nuance of your situation. But again, everyone listening, some of the advice that we grew up thinking would be the smartest steps for retirement may be different today because of the tax law change. And that's something to keep in mind. It's really important. You know, sometimes we fall into these traps, and the trap is to just do what we thought we were supposed to do. And you find that, hey, maybe I could do something different that's smarter for me. If you have any questions, this is the place to call, because Mark's almost finished his CFP classes, and I am a CFP. And you are my clients. I don't have clients, meaning that I don't have anyone. I used to do this for a living. Now I just do it with you. This is my side hustle, in addition to my CBS News life. And I'd love for you to call us anytime. 855-411-JILL. That's the phone number. But Mark really likes getting emails because then he can suss it out with you. So our email address is askjill@jillonmoney.com. Askjill@jillonmoney.com. In fact, that jillonmoney.com, that's a very cool website. I know it because Mark has made it fantastic with the Mad Russian. jillonmoney.com. You can listen to past shows, or if you miss any part of this one, you can read, listen, watch, sign up for our free newsletter, and subscribe to our podcast. That's called Better Off. Okay, when we return, more of your questions. We'll be right back.
Follow Jill on Twitter and Instagram for more personal finance content. Just use the handle @JillOnMoney. Now, back to the show.
You're back with Jill on Money, and we're going to blow through some emails. If you've got a financial question, we'd love to hear from you. Ask Jill at jillonmoney.com. Mark and I are, when I say Mark and I mean Mark. Mark is busy trying to get us up to date and current. But, you know, every week, hundreds and hundreds of emails come in. So we're like digging out constantly. So I think we're going to have to do an all email segment, couple hours. We're just going to do all email shows. We'll see. Anyway, Donald wanted to write in about my recent article called Retirement Stresses Us Out. And he was asking about, this is an EBRI, Retirement Confidence Survey. And in that survey, there was a stat about how big a retirement savings nest egg that people have. And it's broken down like this. About a quarter say they've got less than $1,000. So about 10%, 1 in 10 say they've got 25 to 50 grand, 50 to 100 grand, another 10%. 15% say they have 100 to 250,000, and 21% report having $250,000 or more. So here is the question. This is so funny. My question is, what percentage are over 500,000? What percentage over $1 million? Thank you in advance. The answer is not broken out. It's just one lump category of more than 250,000. Sorry. Shows you, I think, that maybe not many people have. Only 1 in 5 has more than 250,000, so they don't do more than that. Okay. Mike writes, my wife and I have a small business, and we were set up to offer a simple IRA to ourselves and our employees. We used American funds. Even though I was aware of the toll that those fees would take, I contributed as much as I was allowed to. A couple of years ago, I realized that we were not going to hit the number in the next few years, and I felt cheated. I stopped making extra contributions, and instead I started a Vanguard 500 index fund. I've been putting money in there where at least I feel that the fees are lower. Not sure if that was the best thing to do. I also met with an advisor that represented himself as a hybrid of a fiduciary and an I can't remember what. I like that. But his firm's fee is 1% of our holdings per year. Well, on $750 grand, that's $7,500 a year, and I feel it's high. I'm 60 years old. I'd like to retire in 6 and 7 years. I don't feel like they would have enough time to make me enough to justify the fee. Instead, I'm using Morningstar and their star ratings to exchange funds inside my American Funds holdings to at least have some money invested in funds that seem to have a promise of good returns. Am I wrong in all of this? Mike, here's the deal. American Funds, you've already paid to be in them. Once you're in them, they actually have a very, usually, I don't know what share class you have. They usually have a very reasonable ongoing fee structure. So, and they have good funds. So, if you are basically doing non-retirement investing in Vanguard and you're retirement investing at American Funds, that's fine. As far as I wouldn't certainly pay someone just to manage my money, but if you're willing to pay somebody, and they shouldn't be a hybrid. They should be, I'm a fiduciary. And you ask, am I a fiduciary? Are you acting as a fiduciary at all times? That's your big question, at all times. And if not, then you don't need to go to that person. And maybe you don't need this person at all. But if you want to run some retirement numbers and you want to get a sense of where you stand, then you may want to pay somebody to do that for you. But, you also may want to do it with somebody who's going to be working in your best interest at all times. So or maybe you even want to just pay someone by the hour to construct a retirement plan analysis. That's something to think about. Check that out. I wouldn't pay the 1% either. Jill, what do you think would happen to the housing market if interest rates went to 12, 13, 14, 15% as they did in the mid-'80s? And here's the answer. This is what Rick says. 90% of buyers couldn't qualify. Many of the loans made in the last several years would be underwater. As a developer that was building a beachfront condo project in that time frame, our construction loan interest went from, you ready for this, 11.5% to 21%. I note you say that the 4.8% mortgage rate in April was a 7-year high, pushing housing affordability down to the lowest level since 2008. Buyers best just be glad they can get these rates now. Why did rates go up by so much back then? The answer is we had runaway inflation and we had a Federal Reserve that was not dealing with it. So when you have hyperinflation and big time inflation, you've got to have a Fed that's going to do something. And so when we had Paul Volcker come in and actually do something, then we were able to whip inflation then. Get it? Mark, you don't even know what that is. Do you remember, Mark, did you ever hear of something called the win button? Gerald Ford's famous whip inflation now. I believe that was Gerald Ford. Or maybe it was Jimmy Carter. Look that one up. Anyway, we're not about to go into having 12, 15, 17% inflation rates right now. And we're unlikely to see mortgage interest rates go to 12%. But, listen, we could get to 5, 6, 7%, and that would feel just about as rotten as it could have felt in the last 15 years. So I know that would freak people out, but I don't think we're going there. And I do think we have a much more active Fed that is willing to manage the economy in a more responsible way. So I don't want you to worry about it, but it could happen. Anything can happen. It's always kind of scary, but it's true. All right. When we return, we're going to take more of your questions. This is Jill on Money. I am Jill Schlesinger. The guy running the whole show is Mark Talercio, and he has got this beautiful, juicy, free weekly newsletter. Would you go on and to our website and sign up for it? It's free. JillOnMoney.com. You can also listen to past shows or maybe earlier parts of this show if you've missed it. JillOnMoney.com. We'll be right back. You're back with Jill on Money. If you've got a financial question, we'd love to hear from you. Just give us a holler. Our email address is askjill@jillonmoney.com. askjill@jillonmoney.com. Hey, a while back we were playing around with some calculators. I actually found a very good one in terms of how to look at compound interest. It's so nice and easy to read and to use. And it's amazingly offered through the United States Securities and Exchange Commission. I'll send this to you, Mark, also. We should add this to our little panoply of resources at jillonmoney.com. So it's very easy to use, and who doesn't love compound interest? You want to see how much your money's growing? We'll give it to you. Investor.gov is where I found it, and we will send it off. And by the way, there's a lot of really good websites that the government runs. And this brings us to our question right now, which is from Kevin, who says, I don't know a lot about investing, which is why I know that you are probably the only person in the media who always gives good investment advice. Anyway, I'm not a Social Security. No, he says, I know a lot about investing. He didn't say I don't know. He says, I know a lot about investing. He says, I'm not a Social Security expert. I'm 58 years old. And I feel like I should learn something about Social Security. Is there a book or another resource you can recommend? You know what? I happen to think that the Social Security website is kind of fab. Social Security is run by, the website is called ssa.gov. And, when you're looking at it, what's kind of cool is they have a lot of different features of this. They've got a retirement toolkit. They've got publications. They've got calculators. You can look at spousal benefits. You can do a whole bunch of stuff. And I don't think you need to go buy a book to do that. The rules changed a bit after the tax reform went into effect. But this is really a go-to excellent website. So I think you should try that out. Okay, that's closing out hour number 1. And I want to thank everyone for listening. Stay tuned. We've got a great interview lined up. Don't go anywhere. Okay, wait. During the break, go to jillonmoney.com. Just check it out. All right, we will be right back with your questions. It's jillonmoney.com. Just back in a couple.
It's the weekend, and that can only mean one thing. You're listening to Jill on Money, the show that takes the mystery out of your finances. Here's your host, Jill Schlesinger.
You're back. It's hour number 2 of the program, and we are here to take the mystery out of your financial life. And one of the big mysteries right now is how on earth are you going to afford a home? Because we've got this confluence of stuff going on in the housing market. So let's recount that stuff. One is that inventory remains low. So when there's not enough homes for sale, prices rise. So at the exact same time that prices have been marching higher, we also now know that mortgage rates are creeping up. And as the bidding wars continue, more and more people are getting squeezed out. They don't have the 20% down that they need to qualify for a conventional mortgage. And so you have always heard me say, put that 20% down. But maybe the problem is that we don't really understand how PMI works, private mortgage insurance. And that's why we have a great guest this hour. Her name is Nicole Hamilton. She's written a book called Avoid the Money Pit, Turn Your Home into a Financial Powerhouse. And she is a super smart, geeky specialist when it comes to mortgages. Here's our interview with Nicole Hamilton. One of the things you have on your book, Avoid the Money Pit, Turn Your Home into a Financial Powerhouse, is a little factoid that I love. Over 80% of homeowners have most of their net worth in their homes. Less than a quarter feel confident that they will get a great financial outcome. Why do you think that is?
I think that homeownership is tricky on a lot of levels. And one of the primary reasons is because the financing of a home is tricky. And the way that you finance your home does determine to a great degree your outcome. There's also other aspects such as appreciation. Certain areas don't appreciate as much. Appreciation isn't that well understood. Mm-hmm. So the mechanics of how you get a good result with homeownership is sometimes a little hit and miss for people.
When home purchasing sort of came into the frenzied state leading up to the financial crisis, you could essentially buy a house with zero money down, right? You have a heartbeat, we'll give you a mortgage, don't worry about it. And since the financial crisis, when people got wiped out and learned tons of lessons, I field a lot of questions with people who will say, I'm putting 50% down. I'm putting more money down. I never want something bad to happen to me again. What is the sweet spot? We know that a conventional loan is when you put 20% down. What do you think is the sweet spot? What should people be thinking about when they try to determine whether or not to put more than that 20% down or put just that 20% down?
That's a great question. I think it really comes down to individual financial situation, but there are some guidelines, I would say, one of which is similar to investing, where what's your risk threshold, right? And also, how much money do you have overall? If I've seen, very wealthy people put down 50% on a home, clearly for most of Americans, that's not possible, especially with real estate prices these days. So there's a comfort that you need to sort of think about in terms of how much you feel comfortable having in the bank that's liquid, is something that you can access, versus, illiquid, which is in a home. And I think it can be a very powerful investing strategy to have money in your home, but it really depends on your individual situation.
How did this 20% number become the standard bearer? Do you know?
Well, I do know that real estate prices fluctuate, home values fluctuate, and 20% is for lenders a threshold where their risk is reduced. So if prices drop, if you're a bank, you want to have some hedge so that your money is protected. And so that's where the 20% comes in. And that's why if you put less than 20% down, that's considered riskier for a bank and can end up costing you more in terms of interest rates or other fees.
Okay, so let's talk about not having that 20% down. And so I love the point, by the way, that you just made, which is that 20% down is to protect the bank, not you.
Yes.
That has nothing to do with you, really, right?
Well, there are some benefits. So for example, the pros of putting 20% down, one is that you get lower mortgage rates.
That's good.
That's very good. One is that you get less fees. That's also good.
Right.
It's easier to refinance. So if you go to refinance and you don't have 20% in your home, you could find it difficult to take advantage of lower fees or other aspects of refinancing. The other point, which I think is probably most important, is it's easier to move if you have to. Because if you buy a home with less than 20% down, or let's say 5%, and the market were to drop significantly, you're really stuck in the house. And we saw that after the crash, where people, and then what do you do if you have another job? And you need to move, you're unable to have that flexibility.
Right. And that mobility was, you're right, that was a real inhibiting factor where someone could say, I lost my job here, but I could move over here to get one, but I can't sell my house, so I'm tied to this place.
Right.
Let's go to the other end of the spectrum. Housing prices have been going up pretty dramatically. There's just not a lot of inventory. We've talked about that on this program. We hear it from people who live in these many coastal towns where prices are going kind of bananas. And they say, I cannot get 20% down. I can't do it. And I'm afraid the longer I wait, I will keep getting priced out of the market. So what happens when you only can put down, say, 10%? Explain the process, and let's call this the under the title of everything you need to know about PMI.
Okay, so there are a lot of products available out there for people who can't put 20% down. There's 3% down. There's FHA loans, which are government-backed loans. And so there are options out there. So if you're in a situation where you can't put 20% down, typically what happens is that you're going to pay some form of mortgage insurance. And the acronym you just mentioned is PMI, which means private mortgage insurance. And that hedges the risk for a bank when they make a loan to you. And what they do is on top of your mortgage payment, you will pay 0.3 to 1% of the loan amount. And it depends very much on the rate that you pay depends on the size of the down payment, your credit score, and the particular insurer. And there may even be some regional differences as well.
So 0.3 up to a full percentage point of the loan.
Right.
Okay. So let's back up a second. So can I shop around for PMI, or is it something that is going to be compulsory by the primary lender?
So the lender, as far as I know, the lender decides the company that is going to insure the loan, but the PMI companies are relatively similar, so you won't find a great variation. It's generally in this pretty tight range.
Okay, we'll get back to our interview with Nicole Hamilton in just a minute. During the break, maybe you'd like to go to the website. When you go there to JillOnMoney.com, you can sign up for our free weekly newsletter. All right, we'll be right back.
(855-411-JILL). That's the number to call to have your financial questions answered. Back to Jill on Money with Jill Schlesinger.
You're back with Jill on Money. So often in this program, we are fielding questions about your house and how you are going to make home purchases, how you're going to make home sales, what you do with the proceeds, how things are taxed, all those pieces of these complicated transactions. And, it's amazing. According to our guest, Nicole Hamilton, over 80% of homeowners have most of their net worth in their homes, but less than a quarter feel confident that they will get a great financial outcome. And as Nicole says, that's crazy. It's just crazy. So we bring Nicole onto the program today because she is an expert in the topic of when you should be willing to pay that private mortgage insurance amount on a monthly basis, when you maybe would be better off trying to wait to accumulate 20% down. And here's more of our interview with Nicole Hamilton. When should you pay PMI? When should you just wait?
Yeah, well, that's what strikes at the heart of one of the most confusing things as a consumer. Here's this extra fee. You don't want to pay this extra fee, but I think the way to look at it is there are loans that don't require PMI, but they then roll the risk into the interest rate. So there's a lot of kind of tricky maneuvering that you can find in the mortgage industry. So what the best way to compare is really to look at your total costs. Like take two loans. Take one with PMI, one where you're paying 20%, one where it's a loan that rolls the risk into the interest rate, and just do a financial analysis. How much are you putting down? How much are you paying per month? How long do you intend to stay in the house? What's the total cost that you're going to pay? And there's another piece to it which is really important to consider, which is that PMI comes off the loan. You will stop paying PMI when you've paid down your principal up to that 20% threshold. When you have 20% equity in your home, you can request, it's called borrower requested removal of PMI at 80%, so 20% equity. And unlike rolling it into an interest rate, that then disappears.
So that's an interesting thing, because when you first said roll it into the interest rate, I thought, oh, great, then I know that's deductible and that's easy. But then you don't have the opportunity to peel it away. There is some thought, and I know that we've gotten questions about this, that, well, isn't PMI removal an automatic? Isn't it compulsory for the mortgage company to take that PMI off when my equity is at 80, when I have at least 20% equity? How does that work?
Yes, so that's there's actually in the CFPB, Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, the website is cfpb.gov, and they have a guideline. It's easy to Google for. And it specifies exactly how PMI should be removed. And so if it's lender requested, you can contact your servicer in writing and say, I'm at the 80% threshold. I request that my PMI is removed. But at 78%, so if you have 22%, so that's what this means is the value of your home when you purchased it, the appraised value, when your equity reaches the 22% of that amount, it should automatically be removed. And that's an automated process. And it does not matter if your home value has declined in the automatic removal. They are, by law, required to remove it. So it's worth keeping an eye on because it's not always the case that mortgage companies behave the way they're supposed to behave.
Really? There's our breaking news for this. So what's the difference between using a standard lender, bank blankety blank, right, where you borrow money and pay PMI versus an FHA loan?
So FHA loans are loans where you can put down 3.5%. The lowest amount you can put down is 3.5%. And then you're going to have what's called an upfront premium, which is 1.75% of the loan amount. And that is paid either upfront, as the name suggests, but is often rolled into the loan amount, actually. And then you're also going to pay something called MIP, which stands for Mortgage Insurance Premium, which is similar to PMI, and it has its own schedule.
Do you go through the same process to remove that PMI-esque thing that's not really PMI with an FHA loan? In other words, like what happens when you have 20% equity in an FHA loan?
So this is where we have to go to the table because FHAs, they have different rules, slightly different fees depending on the amount that you put down and also the amount that you borrow. So I believe the cutoff now is $649,000. Below that, you get a different table, and above that, you get a slightly different table. But I believe to remove the MIP, which is the mortgage premium for the FHA loan, it's around 11 years out.
So what do you think people are doing incorrectly when it comes to their looking at their house as an asset?
That's a big subject.
Don't you think? I mean, it's like a whole nother show, but I like it. So,
yeah.
I mean, I think that people tend to think of their home as an appreciating asset, even though we've just gone through a horrible housing crisis, and they confuse what is just the natural pace of inflation and what happens to housing, and they say things like this. My mother bought her house for $50,000 and we sold it for $1 million. It's the best investment she ever made. And then I said, well, if your mother took the same $50,000 and had a balanced portfolio, she'd have more money. And they don't want to believe that. That said, I also think that people tend to look at their homes as this retirement planning asset that I just don't think ever comes to fruition in most cases. I think it's really hard to downsize is what I think. I think that many people are sort of stuck in their communities because, not stuck, they want to stay in their communities because their kids are there, their grandkids are there, their friends are there. And then when they look to sell their home, if you've got that $1 million house, you look around and you say, oh, I want to live in a great, easy condo. And you find like, hey, it's $800,000 and the fees for maintaining that are pretty much the same with the fees, or maybe even more, than the fees for me maintaining my home. And so I would suggest that many people are looking at that house too much as a retirement asset when I don't think it's going to end up being one. Now it's your turn.
So on your first question, I think that the biggest sort of mistake or opportunity actually with home ownership is to be aware of how much equity you have in your house, because that's ultimately your money, even though it's not liquid. And a lot of the decisions that you make, including refinancing, taking home equity loans, even things around appreciation and selling your house, that you want to be aware of that equity. And it's, as we mentioned earlier, for most people, it's the majority of your net worth. That's a huge thing. But
Right.
yet a lot of people don't know how to access that information. The other point that you made about should you buy a home or put that money in the stock market? That's sort of an age-old thing. And Schiller, I think, was the one who sort of wrote this paper in the early 2000s about, the returns on the stock market versus real estate. And I would say that it's two pieces. There's one is it is an emotional commitment. It's an emotional decision. It's a commitment. It's a lifestyle. Those are all things about home ownership. It's also a forced savings mechanism. So I think for a lot of wealthy people who are in, sort of a higher income bracket, you may have a lot more of your money in investments and then less in your home. And you have the ability to pay into your investments every month. And that's not the case for a lot of people. So homeownership is a massive wealth builder for that portion of the population that doesn't necessarily save money because you're paying down your mortgage over time.
We'll get back to our interview. It's all about housing with Nicole Hamilton and financing of your housing. If you've got a financial question, we'd love to hear from you. Our email address is askjill@jillonmoney.com. And during the break, go to jillonmoney.com. You can read, listen, watch, and sign up for our free weekly newsletter. We'll be right back.
Do I invest here? Should I put my money there? Jill Schlesinger can help you. Back to Jill on Money.
You're back with Jill on Money. If you've got a financial question, we'd like to hear from you. Just send us an email, askjill@jillonmoney.com. Are you in the housing market? Are you trying to find a home? Are you trying to sell a home? Are you trying to downsize? Are you looking at all different mortgage types? 30-year fixed-rate mortgages started the year at around 4%, and they've been creeping higher to around, let's just call it 4.5% or so. And the problem with that 4.5% rate is not that it's so high. It's not high by historic standards. It's just that as prices have gone up and people have been waiting and waiting and waiting to buy their homes, the affordability of a home has really changed. And so that has led a lot of people to consider ways that they can buy homes and get in a little cheaper. One of those ways is an adjustable rate mortgage, or an ARM. And these can be really good alternatives, but there are caveats to those good alternatives. And our guest, Nicole Hamilton, author of Avoid the Money Pit, has some advice about ARMs and what you need to know before you plunk down that money. So here's the rest of our interview with Nicole Hamilton. How do you feel about adjustable rate loans? What's your view on them, and how do you kind of put that into the decision-making process on home ownership?
Adjustable rate loans are an amazing product if you do not plan to stay in the home past the adjustment date, which a lot of people do move within, let's say, 7 years. Mm-hmm. And if you move within 7 years, you have this incredible benefit of this incredibly low rate, which is below the fixed rate. And so that's a no-brainer to me if you're planning to do that. The trick is that if you're subject to rising rates, like now we're in a rising rate environment. And so people who got adjustable rate mortgages, let's say in 2007, they have seen no adjustments because their rates actually went down because they can adjust down as well. And now they're starting to rise. So the important thing to know if you have an adjustable rate mortgage is that you want to make sure that you have the income, and it's hard to predict for the future that you'll have the income to refinance, and also the equity in your home to be able to get out of it. That's really the key, because if you don't have those, no one can predict interest rates. And so it's incredibly important to hedge that by making sure that you're in the financial position to get out of that loan.
What is the big mistake that people are making around refinancing right now?
Well, so I think I mentioned I started a company called Tactile Finance in 2012, and that modeled financial outcomes visually for consumers. And one of the fascinating findings about that was that when you refinance, particularly when you're several years down the line, let's say 15 years or 10 to 15 years, you are at a point in your amortization where you're paying very much less interest than in the beginning. Mm-hmm. And when you go to refinance, even though your interest rate may be lower, you go all the way back to the beginning of your amortization and you actually pay more in interest than you would if you kept your loan.
Wow.
It's an interesting dynamic that is no one will tell you about from the mortgage world because they make money refinancing. But what we found is that there's probably up to 30% of refinances are not in the best interest of the consumer.
Wow.
Because you're eroding your equity even though you think your rate is lower.
That's amazing.
Yeah. There's some other mechanics, such as if you're 10 years into your mortgage or 15 years into your mortgage, you have a much smaller remaining loan balance. So you can take that and then pay a much smaller payment on that. But it's just there's this extra component, which is equity. So it's your equity component. So the best thing to do when you think about a refinance is to pay attention to how much equity you would have in your house if you didn't refinance and also if you do refinance.
I'm wondering how you feel about terms of loans. Another thing that we'll often hear about from somebody is they'll say, I'm refinancing my loan. I'm 5 years in, let's say, and I'm going to refi from a 30 to a 15. What should that person who's just kind of freaked out about the idea of having a loan for 30 years, what should that person be thinking about?
Well, like all homeownership decisions, it depends on your unique situation. So, if you're in a situation where you have the money to take a shorter loan and pay less interest, often that's a good thing to do. A lot of people, it can be also an emotional decision or a retirement planning decision where you want to get rid of your debt before you retire, right? It makes you feel good
right.
to, not have this, and you don't know what the future will bring.
Although, as you said before, that most people don't have the choice.
A lot of people don't have the choice. That's correct. But again, I would say with any refinance is to often the advice is to look at the interest rate and also the total payment and see if you can afford it. And I would just urge everyone to consider the equity component as well.
What's the downside? If I always like to tell people, especially young people who are going to have kids and have a lot of expenses, and they don't know what the future is going to hold. They want to be, I don't want to have this. I don't want to have a 30-year mortgage. I said, well, have a 30-year mortgage. And if in 15 years you are fantastic and everything's great, then you can pay that thing down faster. Is there any downside to paying it down faster than the 30 years, especially once you're in the principal portion?
No, in fact, it's a strategy that some people use to actually take a completely interest-only loan, which aren't available to all of us, at a low rate, really low rate, and then just pay the principal. So, there's that's a way that you can pay an incredibly low interest rate and also just pay down your loan by just making big lump sums into it. And I think there's a lot of creative strategies like this that are available to homeowners. One thing I would caution people about is when you make an extra principal payment, you have to check the next statement and make sure that your loan amount was reduced by that exact amount, because what happens is sometimes the mortgage company will apply it wrong, and then you're just wasting your money. And that's actually in the CFPB database. There are a lot of complaints.
Yeah, you're right. I love that database. I hope it still stays.
I do too. Maybe I downloaded the whole thing.
Oh, you're so funny. Thanks so much to Nicole Hamilton for joining us today. We will have a link to her book, Avoid the Money Pit, Turn Your Home into a Financial Powerhouse. And if you've got a question, it could be real estate, it could be taxes, it could be investments. We want to hear from you. Our email address is askjill@jillonmoney.com. We will be right back.
Have a finance question? There are many ways to reach the show. You can call anytime at 855-411-JILL, send an email to askjill@jillonmoney.com, or tweet a question on Twitter using the handle @JillOnMoney. Just use the hashtag AskJill.
You are back with Jill on Money, and if you've got a financial question, we'd love to hear from you. Send us lots of information. Let me actually just read an email that is the perfect email in terms of getting a great response because it's replete with tons of information. It's from Mark. Subject, want to retire ASAP, what to do? And then he just goes in and starts listing his assets. $750,000 in TIAA CREF, and he gives me the breakdown. $100,000 in a Charles Schwab brokerage account. ETFs. Let's see. Oh, I see. He gives me the breakdown of the Schwab brokerage account. $13,000 in a traditional IRA. $19,000 in vested stock. $33,000 in cash. Earnings, $81,000 a year. Single, 20 years left on a current mortgage, about $1,200 a month. No credit card, no debt. No credit card debt or loans. Will need a car in the near future. I no longer work in nonprofit. I cannot contribute to the TIAA. I could roll it over. Lackluster performance in 2017 in Schwab. Fidelity 401k, best returns. And then he tells me what he's been earning for each, for the past year, which is irrelevant, so don't even worry about that. How soon can I semi-retire? Considering I earn somewhere between $17,000 and $24,000 a year until age 66. He's 62 now. He's going to get $2,100. No, okay, so here we go. Social Security. Let's forget about pay. He's 62. We're not going early retirement. So you're going to do, at 66 in 2 months, $2,700. At age 70, $3,500. So it looks to me like you have $750, $850, got about $900,000. And you're going to have, he will work and make, let's call it $18,000 a year. It doesn't really tell me how much he needs to live on. What do you think, Mark? What are we going to make? He's got 80. He has an $80,000 salary now. What do you think we should assume he's living on? 50 or 60? All right, Mark's saying 65. I'm going to say $60,000. So he needs $5,000 a month. He's going to have, he said he'll make, let's say, $1,200 a month right now. But let's say when he retires. All right, here's what I think. I think he's probably okay. Because he's going to have about $30,000 from his investments. Maybe more. I'm just going to be really conservative here. So, I mean, if you think about this, you're going to have $30,000 from your investments. And I'm doing this till your age, say you work for 4 or 5 more years. And you got your Social Security is another 30. I think you're kind of done. I think this is it. I don't think you should semi-retire. I think you should keep working unless you're miserable. You could semi-retire and you could have that $2,100 a month in Social Security, but it stinks to have that be a permanently reduced benefit. So I would really try to keep working till your full retirement age of 66 in 2 months. I think that's where it's going to look good. And it's only a few years away. If you're miserable and you want to work part-time, maybe you could do it in a couple of years. You need a couple of years of growth, though. You really do. Don't be moving all your stuff around. Don't be taking on more risk. He looks like about a 60-40 kind of investor. Don't worry about something earning whatever it earned last year. It doesn't matter. It's a long game. And if you're working with an advisor who's not helping you out, get a new advisor. So I think you're going to have to keep working a little bit. Joy has been listening to our program, and she's 71, She lives on Social Security, $800 a month. I'm selling a piece of property for $10,500. I want to know the best way to invest it. I have no idea where to start. If you're living on $800 a month and you have no other money, I would pop that sucker right in the bank, miss. I wouldn't start investing at age 71. So I think you got to be really conservative. And it's always good to have a little liquidity. Don't forget, having a little extra money around, very good. Let's see if I can get one more in. Maurizio, 32-year-old, full-time legal assistant, got debt, $55,000. Ay vey. Purchased a home 4 years ago. He's got equity of around $120,000. Would it be smart move to refinance it, lock in the profit at these rates before they keep going up and pay off the rest of my debt? Which is, yeah, definitely. Go ahead. Go crazy. Absolutely, positively. Try to refi, hit that debt, get rid of it, and you're done. Do all your homework. There's probably fees involved for doing this. Be careful. By the way, someone just said we had an excellent employment report. Why wasn't it mentioned in the Tribune on Saturday or Sunday? I don't know. That's their problem. I have nothing to do with it. Talk to their editors. I have to submit my columns well in advance, so I'm not a news peg kind of gal for those columns. Okay, you're listening to Jill on Money. Ask Jill at JillOnMoney.com. We'll be right back. Okay, you are back with Jill on Money. Coming to the end of the program. By the way, before we started today, Mark handed me a book that I have to read because we're interviewing the author. And sadly, I'm the type of person who reads the books from the authors that come on the program. And you flip to the book, and it looks similar to War and Peace, size-wise. 706 pages is how long this book is. The good news is it really ends on page 616. Notes and index are in the back of the book. So 600 pages that I've got to read in the next 2 weeks. Thanks, Mark. Thanks a bunch. Okay. Gina writes to us, wants to know about mortgages. Is it better to pay ahead on your mortgage or to add the extra payment directly to the principal? Neither. I mean, I don't know. I presume you've got a low mortgage interest rate, so I wouldn't necessarily pay off a mortgage. If you're at the end of your mortgage timeline-wise, or you're at the point where you have crossed over and you are now in the principal portion, not the interest portion, you could just make an extra payment if you want to, but you could also invest the money if you want to. Are there other things you need to do with your money? I think that there probably might be, but I need more information, Gina. Can I do this? Yes. I've heard you talk about index funds. This is from Steve as a low-cost passive investment. And he says, my CFP is a New York Life advocate. He doesn't like index funds. He says they are a buy-and-hold, low-producing investment. I would not like to see them in your portfolio. Why would he push against them? Thanks. And love your newsletter, Steve. Steve, I don't know why he would actually push against them because they are buy and hold. They are low income producing. Is that what he means? They're not necessarily low income producing. It depends on your index. Tell you what they are. They are a way so that you can make more money. Maybe he gets paid more. I would ask him, hey, do you get paid more if I choose a managed fund versus an index fund? Isn't there a reason why everybody is talking about index funds who doesn't get paid by these fund companies? But the ones who do get paid by those fund companies advocate a different position? It's really nonsense. Okay, I'm sorry. This is a soapboxy moment. I don't want to end on that note. I want to end on the fact that this has been a fantastic show. Thanks to all of you who write in. And thanks to Mark, the very best executive producer in the world. We will see you next week here at Jill on Money. Bye.